Johannah, we are here in the House of St Barnabas in Soho Square. And this is a very exciting day for us because we are starting a podcast season called
What Moves Us?
So, I hear that you have prepared a slight introduction.
I have, and it's terribly exciting. So I want to explore really a bit about why we're doing this to begin with, and why we got together, because we decided that there needs to be more human insight into the side of transport, seeking out where the human stories are. Because too often as transport planners, and more about that a bit later, we forget that this is actually about a mobility service, something that we deliver day in, day out, and it's about people. And without people, what is transport about? What is the point of it? We're going to explore some of the current issues, some of the not so current issues, but how we can really improve the transport experience for everyone. Sometimes we might be looking at the bigger issues, sometimes the Williams Review, things like the future of transport, future of driverless cars, the battle for town space between cars, pedestrians, cyclists, which I know is really important to you. Mm-hmm. And the smallest questions, giving a voice to people that we don't necessarily normally hear about, whether it be the engineers, the designers, the operators, the people delivering the frontline services, or people that use our services, the customer, because that's ultimately what we're about. We want to be a broad church, giving voice and opportunity to a diverse range of interviews as we explore what moves us. So here we are. I'm Johannah Randall and
I'm Liam Henderson. So moving on from that, it's probably worth mentioning that we are sitting in Soho Square next to the Crossrail station, which is not quite open yet. If you hear some drilling, that is them busy at work getting the station ready. I think one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is, for example, the Crossrail service. All the press is about the fact that it's running late. What that has meant is that West London, the shopping area, for 2 Christmases now will not be step-free. People needing step-free access cannot come here. They were promised this. So that is one of the implications of it running late.
I think it's interesting that you've brought up the whole Crossrail and the delay to Crossrail, because as when we arrived here, or I arrived here this morning, as ever late, yes. Because I am always late, and I was exasperated because I probably could have walked quicker. Because actually, I think part of the reason why I was delayed was because of the delay to Crossrail. And the fact that it's not being completed, because I thought nothing simpler than hopping on a bus from Waterloo to come up the West End, but it actually involved 2 buses, and I didn't actually end up at my end destination because the bus terminated short because it couldn't get up Charing Cross Road because of delays and all the roadworks that are still going on around
yes.
the transport infrastructure.
Trust me, I cycled up that same road and, well, I was going to record some of my cycling, but I don't think you wanted to hear my shouting at various drivers around me.
And as the industry, we all go on about how terrible it is, but actually the delay, you mentioned that the second Christmas, that they won't, that people won't be able to access step-free access, but it's also still affecting people day to day.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's still building sites, there's still holes in the streetscape, which is a shame. But it'll be worth it in the end.
We hope.
Yeah, well. So I think we should discuss a little bit about us. I guess I'll go first. I'm obviously Liam Henderson. I have a number of hats. I started life as a transport planner in London, had a bit to do with the Crossrail scheme, mostly to do with Docklands Out Railway and tube extensions. I started transporting cities to focus on passenger experience, and I have the lovely task of going around the world reviewing the arrival process at airports, getting people onto trains, which I think we'll come on to quite a bit later.
So you say you're a transport planner.
Yeah.
What does that mean, and how did you get into it?
Thanks for that interesting question. Transport planning for me is, well, I learned that transport planning and land use go hand in hand. We are facilitating people getting around the city for whatever reasons they need to, and the city functioning the way it should do. Sort of a reasonable, appropriate transport for each case. It's not transport for transport's sake. It's to deliver people and goods to where they need to be, or where we plan for them to be in future. In an ideal world, we obviously plan transport at the same time as cities.
And I think it's interesting, Alan, you said about transporting and putting people where they want to be. But quite often, transport planning is about the infrastructure and the economics and the business case.
Oh yes, concrete boxes. Yeah, I think quite often there is it's reduced to. Sorry to all my transport planning friends for this. It's reduced to numbers and statistics and spreadsheets as to what's the economically cheapest way of delivering the policy goal, rather than thinking about the people using the service. One example is we tend to build minimum viable stations, whereas in some other countries, or indeed the major stations in London and the north cities, building big inspirational buildings has sort of an unquantifiable benefit to the local area. People have pride in their big central station, but that would never come out in a spreadsheet or a model.
And why do you think that is? Because things are designed for people to use, and if we don't get them right, people won't use them. So why is that not considered?
It's very difficult because we have to base it on financial case for things, and it's very difficult to quantify using the numbers allowed, the factors that we're allowed to use. It's very difficult to quantify those benefits, the social benefits, which have been allocated a value, which has to meet the Department for Transport and the Treasury's criteria.
I think we should come back to that at a later podcast.
We will do.
Because I think it's interesting to sort of like follow, why you've followed a different path to a certain extent. So why have you focused more on the people and the customer experience side of things, and not followed a traditional transport planner's route?
Because I got very frustrated with building things that people don't really want to use, and they use it because they have to. Yes.
Because why did you get into transport planning? Because is it something you always wanted to do? No, I think I run another organisation, as you know, called the Rail Innovation Group, and if you ask anyone in that group how they got into rail, they'll all say they just fell into it. Transport planning, I just fell into it. I would love to say there's a backstory, but I fell into it. How do you fall into transport planning? Because don't you usually have to study geography or transport planning at university or something?
Yeah, I did do geography at university, but I then went off and had fun doing other things, and then was looking for graduate scheme jobs, and this one looked interesting, but I certainly didn't have a plan that I wanted to be a transport planner. I actually had a vision that I would be somewhere exotic. I'm not sure doing quite what, but somewhere exotic.
Isn't Soho exotic?
Oh yes, I was actually watering pot plants on Soho on Saturday night, so I now seem to spend a lot of time in Soho. Yes, it's. I'd love to say that there was a reason, but there isn't. I like it, and I like that you can have an impact on people's lives in subtle ways, in the way that you push or you develop policy for the benefit of other people or the community. But let's flip this round to you, because you are doing a hugely impactful job.
Which one?
Oh, all of your transport. I don't know. Am I allowed to mention what you do? What do you do, Johannah? Or what's your backstory?
Right. So I think it's interesting you said when you speak to most people, they fell into rail. I wouldn't say I fell into it, but I certainly didn't plan it in the way my career has gone. because I started off as a politics graduate, and I always intended to do something in politics. Don't know what, but that was what I always intended. I had ambitions to work for the United Nations.
Okay. So just easy ambitions to me.
Easy ambitions. And I still haven't given up hope on that may happen one day, because somebody did just tell me, or somebody told me a couple of years ago, that you should never give up hope on joining the United Nations because they have an exceedingly long recruitment process, because it apparently can take you up to 2 years to join.
Okay, so someone has to work there, so maybe it should be you.
So you never know what may happen. But I joined from air. I initially worked in travel, and particularly in the airlines.
To get to the United Nations building.
To get to the United Nations building, obviously. And I was a bit. I was at a career path, and I saw an advert for Great North Eastern Railway when the first train operators were under British Rail privatisation, and they were looking for customer service managers.
Right.
And so I was part of a new breed of people brought in to focusing on customer service in rail. And I think at one stage, as part of this podcast, maybe we should explore sort of like those early days of rail and a bit more about GNER as it was known, and maybe a bit more about franchising. So I won't say too much about it now.
Look forward to that episode.
But I think there's a lot of affection for GNER and a lot of the ways that they did things, and I think it would be interesting to explore how they did things and why it still has such amount of affection in a privatised sector that not many people do feel affection for the train operators that do come and go, and why that was. So I think it would be interesting to explore it. I had the opportunity to go on secondment to York headquarters under GNER to work in the franchising team, because they wanted somebody to join their bid team effectively for the 20-year franchise, who had a focus on customer service and really knew how to deliver it, and it was decided I was that person.
So you would have helped them renew their contract to run the trains for a much longer period?
That was the plan. It never did happen.
Did they win that contract?
We did win the contract, but we only won a 2-year extension, and then we won a 7-year extension after that, and the rest we shall say is history.
Yes, for anyone who doesn't know, there have been a number of operators on the East Coast Main Line.
And as part of that role, I was leading a lot of the station development for the East Coast stations, and one day a compulsory purchase order for King's Cross Station landed on my desk, and I was told to deal with it. And so for, I think, 13 years I dealt with it.
Okay.
So most of my career has been about delivering the redevelopment of King's Cross on behalf of the various operators of East Coast.
This is the donut bit on the side of King's Cross.
The donut. I've never heard it called a donut before.
The big sort of glass.
Yes. Most people call it the spaceship, I think, because it's half a UFO when you look at it from the sky. But it could be a donut as well.
I do tend to think of food. All right, then. And then since that's opened, because that opened in 2012?
The new station opened in 2012 to great acclaim. I'm very proud of that. And I then decided to retire from rail, and I went off and ran a cake shop. So I ran a cake shop very apt considering you thought it was a donut.
What was your cake shop called?
My cake shop was called Johannah's Patisserie, and I had a cake shop in a little place called Oakham, which is a market town in Rutland, and we also operated a little Piaggio coffee van.
Wow.
Which we used to do at Stamford Station.
Right.
So I didn't completely move away from rail, so still did things in connection to rail.
What was your favourite cake?
My favourite cake, the favourite cake that customers used to buy from me was a sac à torte. Used to do quite a lot of those.
What is a sac à torte?
A sac à torte is a Viennese cake, because a lot of my cakes were based on, I used do a lot of patisserie, a lot of French, a lot of Viennese style, and it's effectively
Wow.
a chocolate cake with an apricot filling.
Oh, very tasty. Well, it is nearly.
I now feel as though I should have brought one in.
Well, maybe we'll do that as our theme. You can introduce a cake each time. So clearly, you're still in the baking business. Although I did meet you in a rail context, so I'm guessing you're now back in rail.
I am, yes. So cake business wasn't so successful because although I did win New Business of the Year for Rutland in 2013, and overall it was successful, you have to make a lot of cakes to make money.
Yeah, I imagine so.
So I decided that I wasn't making enough money to pay the mortgage, and I ended up applying for a job in the Department for Transport after the Brown Review. And we can probably talk about endless reviews and what they achieve forever and a day on any podcast. And I joined the direct award team, so I was involved in helping bring reviving franchising after the West Coast failed bid of 2012.
And direct award means?
And a direct award is where we negotiate with the incumbent train operator to extend the franchise to deliver a defined amount of benefits for a short period of time. I mean, they were originally envisaged to only be 12 to 24 month extensions, but as we know, many of them have gone on to be a lot longer. I mean, I think the current West Coast must be 5 years now.
Right.
So that one has been continually extended.
Which I think is probably not very well understood beyond a small group in rail who get the concept of what franchising and direct awards are. So again, we should cover that at some point. But yes, a lot of people's rail services aren't actually profit-making franchises, are they? They're management contracts.
They are management contracts, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not profit-making, because the direct awards they could be done for fixed fees, for a fixed management fee, but they could also be done along competitive tender lines as well, so that you could still, so you would agree what the profit share would be in advance, just like any franchise. And I think that just because they're direct awards, I don't think you should necessarily read into the fact that they're bad for the customer or they're bad for the railway operator either, because they still have to go through the same transport business case as any franchise would be. And if you were to probably measure direct awards in terms of affordability and value for money for the taxpayer, they probably come out just as positive as a competitive tender.
Right.
Because they are negotiated in the same way that any tender would be done, and they have to comply with European legislation in the same way. So they still have a competitive edge to them to a certain extent, and they are bid against what the Department for Transport expects the profitability of that franchise to be, regardless of whether it's a competition or a direct award. Right. And I'd say that that's probably displayed in the same way, in the fact that South West Trains, for example, negotiated a direct award, and they weren't reaching the value for money that they were seeking to achieve on that franchise, so they decided to run the competition instead.
Oh, okay. I think with your short description there is quite... Well, it brings us back to the point that I was making earlier, is that this is all based on numbers and Department for Transport spreadsheets and models and defined outcomes and defined inputs.
Yes.
Not what does it feel like to use these services, or how will it impact your daily life.
And I think, that is problematic, isn't it? Because I don't know where the measurement came from. Do you know where measurement started?
No. Which measurement?
Well, just how we measure transport business cases. What started it? what is the history of transport business cases?
I'm not very sure, but I do know that it's not the same model in all countries in the world. Lots of countries don't build transport because there is or is not a business case above other schemes. We, in this country, do have adopted fully the business case system.
And that's why I was wondering, was that something that came out of the Labour government, that we had to measure, that we had to decide how we were going to be successful? Because that's the thing about franchising, when you talk about rail, is that the Department for Transport or the government, and this is probably, you could probably look at it amongst various contracts across government, across local authorities, they like to buy tangible stuff because you can measure it.
You can measure, yes. You can measure whether it's being delivered. I think that's probably a topic for us to then let's seek out someone who can tell us the history of history of measurement.
So I know that we talk. Just moving up to date. I currently work for High Speed 2.
Oh.
And we have a benefits framework.
Yeah.
Where we try and measure some of that unmeasurable stuff.
Right. Okay.
So we have a measure that is called delivering improvements to the passenger experience.
Well, it's encouraging there is such a measure.
But how do you measure it? How do you know?
How do you know whether the passenger has had a better experience? Well, you go back to the metrics and the questionnaires and the surveys.
But does that really tell you that you've been successful?
No, but I suspect some people get paid a bonus if they do.
So if you were, my area of expertise, so we'll talk about the National Rail Passenger Survey, for example.
Yeah.
Twice a year, various metrics are undertaken by Transport Focus, where they ask a series of questions. How was your journey today? Were you satisfied, dissatisfied?
Yeah.
It's a measure in time. How does that tell you how successful the passenger experience is?
I think those fixed ways of measuring it we are able to enhance those measures these days. The concept of sentiment mapping is now quite widespread in retail and other industries, and there are some small companies bringing in that concept in, so you can continually monitor what's going on social media, what's going on in your complaints letters or anything else, which is the actual impact of your service. If there is a big swell of people getting angry talking about trains, then you know that the passenger experience is dropping. You don't necessarily know what metric is failing, but you do know that in general the population is less than pleased with the service or better than pleased with the service.
So you say retail are using that as a measure?
Well, I'm told by these companies that retail are using it.
I
can get someone in from this.
So who's using it in transport?
I don't. I know some companies using bits of it, but I don't think that I'm best qualified to say who's using it sentiment mapping perfectly.
Because it's interesting, because the great thing about working in the Department for Transport is that you get exposed to all sorts of ideas and companies and policy areas and that. And I was involved towards the end of my time at Department for Transport, I worked in policy. So I moved away from franchise letting and worked about 10 months in transport policy, particularly in rail policy.
Right.
And I got involved in 3 areas of policy. So 1 was innovation.
Yeah.
2 was accessibility, which I'm really keen on in terms of how we improve that, and also consumer rights, because we had a lot of work going on at the time with EU directives about adopting the next stage of consumer rights, which is all to do with passenger compensation. But bringing it back to the innovation was that I got to meet lots of small medium enterprises, SMEs, as part of that. And one of the ones that I worked with at the time through the Transport Catapult is Zipperbound. And they were developing sentiment mapping.
Right.
But to my knowledge, and it was a great tool. I mean, you probably can still bring it up on the demonstrator online. It was great because they could look at any train in the country, because they were collecting data from all over the place, because these are data people, and they could tell you whether a train or a station was happy or sad. But to my knowledge, nobody's taken it up.
Well, I think given you've worked at the Department for Transport, you'll probably be better qualified to say why or why not that would be worthwhile for a train company to take up. If they're not scored based on the outputs of that, but then why would they adopt something that might cost them money?
Well, that's the flaw, isn't it?
So
it comes back to how do you measure the passenger experience?
Yeah.
Because if it's not in the contract, you're not going to measure it.
Yes.
And you have to be able to compare like with like. And if you have one operator doing it, which they may do because they may keep it internally for their own commercial purposes, but not advertise that they do it.
Yes,
that they're monitoring
comment
it.
on that.
But National Rail Passenger Survey allows everybody to be comparing like with like and to be on the same page. But the problem with National Passenger Rail Service, because it is only one day, if you have a poor train performance day, i.e. you have disruption and your trains aren't running on time, then you're not going to get good customer satisfaction, because there is a direct correlation between how I feel satisfied as a customer. Is my train running on time? Am I getting to my destination on time? And it's only when that need is met that then I start thinking about all the other hygiene factors. Do I have a comfortable seat? Do I have Wi-Fi? Is the toilet clean? Can I get a cup of coffee? All of those other things that make the journey more pleasant.
Yeah. Well, encouragingly, we are recording this 2 days after the European elections, but I did hear during that campaign various people saying, some people saying that the Treasury should include well-being in its targets rather than just GDP growth, in which case that would filter down to not necessarily having to score everything on a financial basis, to include health and well-being statistics in what your transport system is doing, which, given policy will take 10 years for it to filter down, that might be that things that we think are better, for example, going for a walk in a nice streetscape, may get scored favourably in a future policy framework.
It's interesting you say about, because I read something, I think it was this morning, about a transport operator in Europe that were gamifying how you arrived at the station. Okay. And I can't remember who it was, because they...
As in, you score yourself against other people, or you score
if you arrive by bike or by walking, you could earn fit points, which would be translated into transport prizes.
Points mean prizes.
And
so
it's a way of discouraging people by using sustainable transport,
which they give you then as your prize. More motor-powered transport.
Yes.
Right.
Well, not necessarily more motor, but more public transport. So buses, and so it was very much linked to public transport rather than private transport.
Right. Okay. Well, every little helps. I wonder. Well, the problem is that they don't have. Very few operators in Europe have any control outside the station area. So, what can they do to encourage people beyond giving points? Working together for a nice urban realm and transport system integrated for the passenger experience.
But see, that's interesting itself because, going back to, and we will explore other transport operators around the world as part of this podcast. But
we're going to go on tour. Does that mean we can go on tour?
First stop,
during
Munich.
During winter. That's true. We're both in Munich in a couple of weeks.
But I think it is interesting because do you think that other countries get that whole end-to-end journey better than we do in the UK?
From I would say very few do the end-to-end journey as a more integrated, consistent passenger experience, or have the sort of control to improve all of those bits. I think there are countries that have better funded public transport, therefore it's just nicer and seems like it's integrated. And there are parts of the UK that have quite a nice passenger experience throughout, but that's a nature of historic reasons rather than an overall plan.
What's an exemplar in the UK then of where they've got it right?
The through passenger experience?
Yes.
Well, this is the thing. I don't think it's through action. I think older, smaller towns with a nice pedestrian centre, with a train station in the middle, just feels nicer. It feels like a nicer experience through the journey. If you have to drive or if you have to sit on a bus through some poorly planned urban area to then cross a car park or a motorway to get to a suburban station, that's where it's less nice.
Because I think that's what's quite interesting, isn't it? Because probably we're at a stage where for the last 40 years everything's been planned around the car.
Yes.
And maybe, because of just the way our life is changing now, people are becoming increasingly urban, younger people are not learning to drive. Do you get a feeling that that's actually turning around now? We are thinking more about how people get around by public transport.
I'd say so. I'd say obviously more in urban areas and towns, you can see new apartments being built close to the station, whereas in the past it would be a DIY warehouse or a light industries area.
Which isn't very pleasant, is it, really?
No. But now you're getting newish apartments close to the train station, or the bit between the train station and the city centre. Those walks are getting much nicer because local authorities know that it's a nicer way to get people in to come to their shopping district by making the walk nicer from the station. But they're probably doing that to attract people in, not to help people going to a train to go elsewhere.
And I think that's interesting when you say about, a nicer walk and to attract people in. Because what do you think, as a transport planner, transport role is in, say, reviving town centres? Because we all read about sort of like the demise of the high street.
Yes.
But presumably transport can help.
Yes, it can help to a point. I'd say yes, it helps. Until such point as your transport is so good that you become a dormitory town.
But that's almost a different problem, isn't it? Because
we've got a party walking past.
Because I live now in Brighton.
Yeah.
And Brighton's it's London on Sea, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's a very vibrant city. It has excellent transport links all round the city. I mean, because interesting fact, more people use Brighton buses than London buses.
Isn't Brighton Buses the only local council-owned bus company left in the country?
I don't know if it's locally owned or not. It's operated by Go Ahead, I know that.
Oh, right, it used to be.
But I don't know whether they still overall own it.
I thought it was.
And we also
have
another bus company that are trying to become a sustainable bus model, but they are crowdsourced called the Big Lemon.
Yeah.
But also
Are the buses yellow?
The buses are yellow. Although I actually think they look more like bananas than lemons.
Okay. All about food.
They do look more like bananas than lemons, but I think they run on recycled fuel at the moment, but they will eventually be run on. So some of them may be solar power. I can't remember that, but they're quite a new company.
Yeah.
And so there is a brilliant bus service in Brighton which runs most of the day. So you don't necessarily need to get on a bus. I mean, get in a car. And it has a really good train service all along the south coast and up to the capital.
Yeah.
But it also is still a very vibrant town because it's
a big place though.
It's a big place. It doesn't really have industry as such, but it has a lot of financial services there, a lot of design services, a lot of tech, and a lot of tourism.
And two universities.
So, yeah. But it still has its problems, I think, with shops, just like everywhere else is. But although lots of people commute into London, it still has enough of that centre. But compare that to a place where we moved from and we lived for 10 years, actually just over 10 years, Oakham in Rutland. And that has got the dormitory effect completely.
Which is, from geography-wise, is sort of halfway to Nottingham? Or?
It's in between. It's halfway between Peterborough and Leicester.
Okay, so right in the middle of the country.
Right in the middle of the country. I mean, it's probably 20 miles from Nuneaton, which I think is the centre of England, I think. Okay. So it is the heart of England. It has poor transport links,
right.
Hourly train service, no bus service, so to speak of, and I was quite heavily involved in the local politics of Oakham and Rutland, and they were cutting bus services back because austerity.
Yeah.
So there was no money to fund loss-making bus services, and yet, interestingly, for a place like Oakham is affluent, but it also has quite a lot of poverty in the area as well as lots of rural areas do. And there are lots of people that rely on the bus services to get around, to get to hospital appointments, to get to school, to get to college or whatever. And they were declining. But
going back to your point you made, well, your question earlier on was about how transport planning can help with regeneration. But if you are a local authority outside of a big city, you don't really have much control over your public transport or local transport. All you can do is make the roads swifter.
Absolutely.
You can't operate a bus system when you can't operate a tram system. So that's why the roads are prioritised.
And I think there's two interesting points within that, because one, you're right, that is all they can control. But also in a small place like Rutland, they just don't have the resource to really plan things.
Yeah.
And beyond, I think they had maybe one transport official who's responsible for, I don't know how big Rutland is, but it's a small county. It's the smallest county in Britain, but it's still a lot of work for one person.
Yes.
And everybody in that area, because they're dependent on their car.
Yeah.
If you can drive, you are dependent on your car. I couldn't drive before I moved there. I moved there in my mid-30s. And I had to learn to drive.
Right.
Because I couldn't. Yes, I could have relied on public transport, and I did probably for the first few years. We only had the one car, but when you can't access transport, regardless of whether it's public or private, as a person, you're so limited.
Yeah.
It limits your life. So if your first train in the morning isn't till 7 o'clock, and your last train is 8:30, and you live in a small town with not many shops,
Not many jobs.
not many jobs,
Yeah.
not much entertainment, it's life limiting. And that's really why transport matters.
So that would be, what's the point of transport?
What's the point of transport?
We've answered it. We don't need to do a season anymore.
But that's the point. It's not really about transport.
Yeah,
It's about opportunity and about how that allows people to live their lives.
Yeah. Big questions.
Big questions.
Right. Okay. Shall we have a cup of tea now?
That sounds like a good idea.
Sadly, no cake because someone didn't bring us cake. Someone can bring me a cake next time. In Munich. Right. So, thank you very much for listening to us. We have a whole programme of questions that we would like to ask, covering things such as, what have we got? We've got smart cards, we've got high-speed rail, we've got research, we've got emotional mapping on the experience, we've got cycle highways, mobility, future mobility, driverless cars.
Driverless cars, one of my favourite subjects.
Well, save that thought for next time. So we will obviously have some sort of jingle music going up, but at the moment we're just going to do the pitter-patter of feet. This is the feet. And then we'll get some bus noises. Beep, 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 beep. Right, thank you. Goodbye, Johannah.
Bye, Liam. See you next time.